I can go ahead and share the screen, share my screen in a second.
That's weird. I don't seem to have record as an option either.
Well, I had thought it was supposed to be the TOC members who are on the invite, but I am on the invite with my new email and I don't have access either. But maybe it's like I got added after the invite was created, so somehow it didn't work. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyhow, it's recording now, so all good. I guess no one's sharing, but we've got our first one up is about issue with mixed case virtual host names. Anyone here to talk about this?
Yes, I'm here. I'm Siddharth. Can you hear me?
Yep. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So regarding this mixed case virtual service host names, we the behavior we are observing is whenever we use a mixed case virtual service host name, there is the expected associated service is not getting the updated routes. So we already know the basic functionality of how a service works, right? Whenever there's a service, there's a route created with the same port name, the port name and the host name as the domain name. So for example, there's a service name which is in the lowercase and the virtual service host name with uppercase. We won't get a match, and the virtual service does not update the route. So for mixed case virtual services, there is no service which is getting updated with routes, and services don't allow host names to be in mixed case. So in turn, any virtual service host names which are in mixed case are being ignored without any route updates. So what we feel is any virtual service or other resources like destination rules and service entries have to do a strict checking on the host names to be in lowercase only, or throw an error like the service is doing that mixed case host names are not allowed. This is the overall context. Did you get my point?
Yes, I did, and I added a comment this morning to the issue about this. So, like you mentioned, services in Kubernetes have to be lowercase per the spec. So, DNS subdomain names and defined in RFC 1123, they're explicitly lowercase alphanumeric characters. And so, because of this, we kind of bake that assumption into Istio and into apparently into hostname matching as well. So I'm curious to hear kind of what your use case is. Is there a reason why you can't just make the host names all lowercase?
Yeah, we can make host names lowercase, but in case if someone tries to make it mixed case, it's better to have a warning that mixed case is not allowed rather than just allowing a mixed case host name to get applied, and then there is no route updated. There's an ambiguity, right? We need to be checking the whole route scenarios to understand the case. So if this happens same like the service, I think it would be a clearer path for someone who is configuring virtual services or other resources similarly.
I hear you. I think from my perspective, the fact that when you're doing a host name match, you're matching the host header, and you're doing kind of a strict equality type of thing with that host header match. And if the cases aren't the same, then the cases aren't the same. Most browsers help you out by kind of converting things to lowercase. But if I remember correctly, the spec is an exact match. You look at the actual HTTP RFC. And so because Istio's network is a networking technology, we have to kind of appeal to the greatest number of use cases. And the best way for us to do that is to follow the spec as closely as we can. And by spec, I mean HTTP spec, Kubernetes spec, etc. And so From my perspective, I'm curious if anybody else has any opinions here. From my perspective, this is kind of working as intended, and I'm not seeing much reason to change that, especially since the way to fix the error is just to make sure the case of the host name is lowercase. Maybe you can add a line of documentation somewhere, but outside of that, I think probably as expected.
I think Envoy already normalizes the case, and so if you have like uppercase and lowercase the same host, it'll actually reject it. There was a recent bug that Rama fixed or was working on. So I'm not 100% sure that I agree with that. Does seem kind of like we might want to reject them in some way. I mean, I would say definitely reject if we were building the API from scratch now. I'm just not sure now whether it's right to reject invalidation or to normalize it in our control plane code. Unless I'm misunderstanding, I didn't actually go read the RFCs. I just.
So if we had status, I think this would be a little bit easier because that kind of gives us a place to opt to kind of write arbitrary messages and such. If the decisions between reject versus allowed and fail silently now, I think I'm probably in favor of the status quo, just because I would hate for stuff to exist. Granted, if it's not working now, it's not that much of a big deal, but it's a different failure mode. We could normalize silently in the background, I suppose. I don't know. I have to go back and double check the RFC, but I'm probably more inclined to keep it as is. But others just disagree. I'm not. I don't have strong opinions either way.
Seems like at least a warning though would make sense, just because it could cause surprises to people.
Agreed.
Behavior, but
yeah, a warning I think is very non-controversial. Like there's no good reasons to use uppercase. Now whether we want to warn or hard fail, I don't know. That's always a tricky question. Probably hard fail is fine, but.
I actually have a doubt. So when services don't allow mixed cases, in what scenarios allowing mixed case virtual host would help?
Because Istio is not just about services. We have arbitrary destinations, service entries, etc. So, and you can do matches on things that aren't even exposed as services or service entries. So we expand beyond Kubernetes. Now, that being said, there's no good reason to do a match on mixed host anyways, because that's not how host headers work. At the very least in Envoy, if not on HTTP in general. I believe it's an HTTP level thing, not just Envoy. Go ahead, Qasim.
Two comments. One, if I'm not sure about warning, but I would put it in the status, because we are starting to tell people, especially in gateway worlds, that the status is a right place to find information about something that is valid or not Istio logs or whatever control planes they use. Regarding the host name, as far as I know, this is specified in the DNS RFC, where host names are case insensitive, and it's kind of taken over by HTTP and pretty much everyone using DNS for names, because obviously you cannot do anything else. So I think normalizing, and I mean, we had the similar security discussion about normalizing URLs, and I remember it was a very long discussion, but in the end, security is probably very important because this may have security implications.
Yeah, if the DNS spec is case insensitive, then just ignore everything I said up until this point. Then we definitely should normalize.
I'm pretty sure about it. I just researched it.
Yeah, I believe so.
Also, one small comment. Usually for gateway, we discuss about what other implementation, prior art, etc. it's useful to conform with Apache Nginx and usual suspects what they are doing. So we are consistent, especially in the new world of interoperability.
Well, it sounds like the decision here is to fix this and to normalize in some way. The specific mechanism is TBD, but the action items are to check prior art and to find something that is somewhat aligned with that. Is that a pretty good summary?
Is there any security action items?
Well, to fix this, that's because it can be abused.
All right. Seems like that this topic has got closure. Anybody else have any comments or questions before we move on to the next topic? All right. Thank you, Vinkata, for bringing this up and both in the issue and being here for the working group meeting. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Keith. We'll be asking for if I have any further doubts in the community. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Next topic is Zrain on unhired user correct ID for trace sampling. I think Zrain is in a time zone that doesn't allow them to attend this meeting, but does anybody else want to provide context here? Costin, I see there are a couple comments from you in the thread. Not sure if you've got opinions here.
Nothing beyond what. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say probably what you were going to say, that it seems like the thought process here is that we had an API that was hidden for a long time, therefore we should expose it, which seems to be wrong. If we have an API that's hidden and unused for a while, then the solution should be to delete it or keep it. I mean, we need more context, I guess, but certainly not this API is totally unused, therefore it should be promoted to V1. That's not a good idea, right?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it's yes, I agree, 90% what you said. The 10% is if there is a use case and someone actually needs this feature, which may be, in particular since the default behavior is kind of wrong, it's not about keep it or delete it, it's about review it as an API. There are some comments there about the bool, default value, style, and so forth. And then add it with the proper, as a proper API. I'm perfectly fine with either one, but we need to have a clear review as an API, because when we did the original stuff, we kind of ignored all those aspects and just added it.
Does anybody have context on the practice of hiding APIs from documentation, especially now that release channels are a thing, are going to be a thing? I'm wondering if the idea of hiding something from documentation kind of creates a third state, a tertiary state that we don't really like. So specifically, Whitney, I think, added specified that this particular field should be in the extended channel. Is there a need for another layer of experimental don't use this besides the extended channel?
The initial usage was to allow people to send something to the API, and then the implementation may proceed, but may be slower and may not make it. So to avoid risks that we ship with an API that doesn't have an implementation. That was kind of the original use case. So even with the release channels, we still need the way to have this kind of state where the API is in progress.
I hear you. I agree a bit with what Ben is typing in the agenda right now. Ben, I don't know if you want to come off mute and say it synchronously, but I don't know that the hide from docs feels weird to me, especially in light of voice channels. I don't know why we need both.
That's also kind of how we deprecate things.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair use case. So moving backward from this is a thing, we're deprecating it. Don't use it anymore, but it's still going to work in your install. But I don't know that the use of hide it initially makes a ton of sense to me.
So do we agree that we should deprecate this? Because if that's the case, then I don't think we should unhide it. And yeah, although it's in the extended channel right now, if we do want to deprecate it, we shouldn't unhide it.
On the merits, I don't know that we need. Go ahead, Costin.
No, I'm saying if someone finds a use case in the next week or so, then we need to start discussing it as an API. If not, deprecate sounds reasonable.
So digging into the merits a bit for this field, I think it. I think there's a use case for it, but as Costin mentioned, that there are some problems with it. For example, it's a Boolean field that defaults to true. That's not great. Deprecate. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So yeah, we could deprecate this field, but I think there needs to be a replacement for that functionality, especially if you do find a use case for it. If this functionality persists, it would probably be under a different name, mainly because I don't. Again, bool field defaulting to true makes things, just on the face of it, it's not super great. So yeah, I think I'd agree. I think I probably agree with deprecating it in general, and then iterate on it in the extended channel with a new name. I think that's one of the things that release channels allows us to do.
So I just wanted to raise that the person who opened this issue in one of the comments is asking, can we just remove it? So I don't know that like this person actually wants to keep it or has a good use case for it.
But before we go and remove something, can we make sure we go see why it was added? Because I often see people that without context going and saying it should be removed, and everyone agrees. And if you look at the original context, granted, should it have been harder to remove things? Sure. But there's all sorts of things that I've seen removed that clearly should not be removed. And it would be quite obvious if you just looked at why they were added. I don't know, probably not the case in this one, to be honest, but we should check.
By the way, John, can you confirm, because my understanding was that a hidden field can still be used by someone who's looking at the documentation, and they can still set it and it still take effect.
Yes.
It just doesn't show in the documentation, doesn't mean it's not used.
It doesn't show up in our Istio.io documentation. It still shows up in the CRD documentation and OpenAPI schema. Yeah.
And you can apply it, you can use it. It's just that it's not in the public documentation. So we need to be careful. I mean, use the version start that you did, the Rust file. If we remove it, I mean, it's not simply just remove the field from there.
Right, we need to deprecate it first, even if we're going to remove it.
Okay, so I think I see a decision being made here. Sounds like general consensus is to deprecate it after confirming the original use case. Anybody misunderstanding that? Anybody have anything else to add here? All right. I guess we're on to the next agenda item, which is this PR. The WASM plugin phase. I saw this, don't have a ton of context for it, and there's more discussion here that I have not seen. So does someone want to provide context here?
Yeah, I think the question was, there was the PR adds a new phase to WASM plugin that's called initial, which, as it sounds, it means it's the first thing in the chain. So the question was whether this is appropriate or if we need to have it at all, or if it needs another name. I think there was two comments there. One, if initial was wrong because all of our other things are more abstract, that's like this is the authentication phase. And the other was, do we even need initial, or is authentication enough? And maybe we refactor some of the metadata exchange things to make it viable to do what they want to do here, I think.
So initial would be used for when they want the WASM plugin to execute before metadata exchange happens?
Yeah, I mean, technically before anything happens, but in this case specifically, metadata exchange is the thing you want to go before.
Interesting. I see. I mean, how common is that use case? Like what's the use case for running WASM before everything else? Is it to not pay the? I mean, the HTTP gets accepted. Do you not want to do auth first? Do you want to? Yeah, I guess I'm not clear on what.
There was a pointer. There should be a pointer to an issue that explains what metadata exchange was causing to happen. I think something was removed that they couldn't see.
Oh, I see it here. Okay. It's missing a header. Oh, because metadata exchange is removing the header afterward or something like that. Okay.
And I believe Kuat has a comment in here that maybe the metadata exchange filter should just not strip these headers, and that might be better than adding a new phase.
That was going to be my question. Like, does this? Oh, it's probably the other thread. Like, does this? So the concern with not stripping the headers is that they get leaked, but we already have another mechanism for scrubbing the headers, the proxy headers mesh config option. So if we can, scrub it with that.
But it seems like we shouldn't have plugins use the header, right? They should use the metadata. Don't we write the metadata, or could we write the metadata to some metadata dynamic? Should we write some exchanged metadata to dynamic metadata that can be read by the WASM plugin? Like otherwise, they're gonna have to parse the whole header, which is like our kind of semi-internal format with the whole flat buffer thing. And I don't think that what you're saying, Keith, actually would work quite here. Like we have a way to avoid sending the header, but then that would mean that we never send it. We wouldn't have a way to say on inbound strip the header later or something.
I see.
We already did. Like any code relying on reading a metadata header is certainly not ideal. Kind of relying on our implementation detail. Now, granted, relying on some Envoy dynamic metadata is also probably not that stable of an API.
I was going to say, you're still kind of relying on the internal Istio format of storing things.
It's a slightly less internal API, though. Well, I mean, it's in a way that we could still have the ability to tweak how we exchange metadata, right?
Fair,
through
yeah.
HBone or through WDS or whatever, and then their plugin could still work. Now, granted, I think that's fine. Like, we don't treat these as proper APIs, but people can still use them and adopt them if or when we break them. But in this case, like, we're actually changing our API to support that, so it's a bit murky.
Yeah, I think I agree. Hearing all the context now, I feel like on the original question of should WASM plugin have a new phase to make sure. I mean, the original motivation is the metadata header. There may well be more use cases for an initial phase, but there's a more targeted way for us to be able to solve the metadata exchange problem. And I do think that it's as a project, it's worth us codifying our metadata exchange a little bit better from a documentation standpoint. And while like a WASM plugin should have access to those sorts of things since you're running inside the proxy, it shouldn't cost you, reading headers and stuff like that in order to be able to get that, to extract that. So I'm probably more on the side of let's solve the metadata exchange problem with WASM plugin in the most narrow way possible. And if we need to have a wider way to do early WASM execution, let's address that then. Anybody else have something they want to add? Any other opinions? Okay. So yeah, sounds like appreciate you taking notes, Ben. Yeah, the decision here is to revert and to instead let's iterate on the metadata exchange and make that metadata available to WASM plugin. All right, that's the end of our agenda. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Otherwise, have a little less than 30 minutes back. Going once, going twice. All right, appreciate it.
Thanks,
I'll see some of y'all at the ambient meeting. Take care.